This is another episode of Hey, did you see this one?
Hey, did you see this one?
I
Hey,
did.
did you see this one?
I saw it.
Hey, Steve, did you
So,
see this one?
I saw this one. I saw it. I saw it very recently, and I had never seen it before.
Was that the first time you saw it?
Yes,
what? This
So it
movie
doesn't
is an
have that
absolute.
nostalgia value for you then.
not at all. I had heard about it a couple of times throughout the years, just through watching, stand-up comedians talking to each other, mostly regarding Norm or Bob Saget. So I knew it existed, but I never really had the urge to be like, well, I got to check out Dirty Work, the one movie starring Norm Macdonald.
The one, literally,
Yeah, I
except
think
for
it's
he
his only
plays.
one, right?
Yeah, except for he's in. He kind of after the Doctor Doolittle. This is weird. I looked this up because I want to know what else Norm's been in. So he plays one of the dogs in the first three Doctor Doolittle movies, starring I think the first two are Eddie Murphy, and then it's like goes to like his daughter
Like the
takes
voice
over
of
the
the dog or
mantle.
something?
Yeah, and then eventually it becomes a series of movies about the Norm's character, the Norm's dog character.
Oh,
So he's
interesting.
got he's got an animated dog thing. He's got
I mean, he
a
plays a lot of
wide.
animated characters. He's in. Sorry, I'm just sharpening my pencil. Don't mind the noise.
What are you sharpening your pencil for?
Because I have to scratch my notes off when I am done making a point.
Oh, okay. That's
I'm a
organized.
professional, man.
Old
Uh,
school.
um, yeah, he's been in like he was in Fairly Odd Parents. He was in the Family Guy. He played Death in
He
Family Guy
played
for a
Death
little
on Family
while.
Guy famously.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah, yeah. That was good. That's
um,
classic.
he was in the Mike Tyson cartoon show. He played the
He's the
pigeon.
pigeon, right?
Was it the
Yeah.
bird? Yeah, yeah.
He was
Keep
also
going. Two
in
seconds.
more recently. He was in the Orville. He played like that weird blob monster. I was like, hey, I'm a creepy pervert blob alien.
So that's sort of you pretty much nailed Norm's shtick in that one little micro impression because throughout his whole career he's always the guy that's just like edgy dad joke, but he has such an amazing delivery
His
and
delivery and
he
cadence.
somehow that cadence and he never lost it. And if you don't know, Norm Macdonald passed away this last week or so. It was a huge hit to the comedy community, obviously. And I grew up with Norm Macdonald on Saturday Night Live, and I owned this movie on VHS, which I bought here. I'm from Halifax originally, but we came to here to Toronto on my grade 9 trip, and I bought it, and then we watched it until the tape basically fell apart. So I've seen this movie backwards and forwards so many times that said, I haven't seen it in probably 15 years, but I've seen this movie so many times that there were little bits in this movie that are part of my vocabulary that I forgot how they got there. Like I say, son of a bitch, bastard, all the time. And the line where the homeless guy is like, "Oh, did you fart?" "Oh no, that was me from before." That's a
uh,
bit. That's a bit.
I wrote that one down. I guess I'll cross it off. It was very
That's a.
funny. He's like,
That's
I'm
a
sure
bit.
I smell horrible. Also, I just farted.
Also, I farted.
Yeah, that was one
So
that I was like, oh, funny.
the other thing about this movie that's great is it has the bones of an Adam Sandler movie.
It
It has
really
a lot
does,
of the
yeah.
same recurring characters. Adam Sandler himself does do a cameo in this movie as the devil in one of the weirdest
If we
scenes.
burn.
It
Yeah.
burns. That's another thing. First we eat the pig and then we burn. That's a thing that I used to say
So
constantly.
I'm sure that that was probably funny to you when you were a kid, which I guess will still hold strong as an adult. But for me, I was like, oh, it's Adam Sandler. Oh, he's doing that old thing that he used to do
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah,
was
yeah.
maybe funny to people at one point. But to me, it was not funny. The one thing that was funny in that scene is when he looks over, it's Gary Coleman, and then he looks back, and he keeps looking back at Gary Coleman, and at the end, Gary Coleman just starts doing like a crazy maniacal laugh. That was what was funny to me about that whole exchange with his
So
hallucination.
there was a period of time where the hoopty boopity boo Adam Sandler thing was like the funniest shit. It was
Right.
revolutionary comedy somehow.
I
Now
I don't understand it. I don't get it. I don't
it's
It's
know
it's
why
funny
it's funny.
because it's
it's
silly.
objectively not funny now though is the thing. And
Yes.
I specifically found the Billy Madison shtick that was like one of my favorite movies until I realized that movies could be good. I think
Right.
not just
Yeah.
like
I
dumb
mean, like
raunchy comedy.
I don't hate Happy Madison movies. I think that they're things that you're just supposed to turn your brain off and let the jokes hit you in the face. Like it doesn't matter about the overarching story at all. You're not supposed to get invested, which is similar to this movie. It's very reminiscent of like sketch comedy where they're just like, let's have a bunch of set pieces that are funny jokes
Uh-oh.
that build
Uh-oh.
out a plot that exists inside of this movie. But it doesn't really necessarily matter what the plot is because we know that the character is going to have an upward rise, a downward fall, and then, you know, some sort of issue that they need to solve, and then they're going to live happily ever after at the end. And
And
that's
totally
every,
redeem themselves.
exactly, that's every Happy Madison. That's every sort of like sketch. I call it sketch comedy because I almost see like those bits as little SNL skits, like
Yeah.
individual skits that exist. It reminds me of something like what's that movie called? Don't Be a Menace in
To South
South
Central
Compton.
while drinking
While drinking your juice.
Yeah, exactly. I forgot the whole title. I remember the first part.
I got
Um,
that VHS on the same trip that I got this movie, so that was in
that
heavy
movie
rotation.
I watched a bunch when I was younger, and it reminds me a lot of that. It's kind of the same sort of formula. Um, yeah, no, I mean the point that I was trying to make is that like this kind of comedy had its like heyday, and that heyday is sort of over, but like it still exists. Like there's echoes of it here and there now. Like Adam Sandler, every time he makes a Netflix movie, it's basically the same sort of style, except now he plays like a millionaire every time.
Or
I'm really rich.
Hubie,
Nobody asks me what my job is.
Hubie Halloween from a couple of years ago. Herbie Halloween, what was that movie? Anyway, that
I think it
Netflix
was
No, I didn't
one
see
Hubie.
where
that
he was
one. I
basically
was
the
thinking
water
more
boy.
about that cowboy one that came out close to the Hateful Eight that has a similar
Oh,
kind of name that
the
I can't remember. The Ridiculous
yeah,
Six. There.
I never
Where it's
watched
the
it.
same sort of feel, right? Like, you know, it's just funny moments packed into a story that is, you know, if you really boil down the story of Dirty Work, it's like they need to raise $50,000 not to save the old man to get his heart surgery, but to pay off Chevy Chase so that he can pay a bookie so that he's alive to perform the surgery,
Yeah,
which
because
is
for
a
some
funny
reason he's the
concept.
only
But
doctor
like,
that can do it.
if you were to look at this and not really pay attention too closely, you would think the money is going towards to pay for that surgery, but it's not. It's just going to make sure that Chevy Chase doesn't get murdered by the mob.
And then he does it for free. He does the surgery for free is what I get out of that.
Yeah, because he's basically paying with his life, the fact that he's alive.
Yeah.
I think that Chevy Chase's shtick in this movie was the funniest part of it. Like every time you see him, he has like a new injury, and
Yeah, that was great.
the first time you meet him, he's like, "Are you a gambling man?" Like, he's like, "I guess so, yeah." And he's like, "Well, if I was to make a bet on your father's chances of living, I'd say he's probably gonna die. Safe bet on death." Uh,
There's so many little jokes like that strewn throughout the movie, like how the grandfather was like, "I gotta." This is another one me and my buddies used to do all the time when I was like 15. I'll give you a hint. It rhymes with cock. Was like the funniest shit to me when I was 15 years old.
right. I think that like it's weird because like that kind of stuff, I'm like, I'm sitting there and I recognize that it's funny, but I'm not emoting at all. Like I'm sitting there watching the movie, like I can see that this was a funny moment, but it's, you know, and it is funny. I'm not going to say it's not funny, and I'm not going to say that anybody's wrong for thinking it's funny, but to me, I did not laugh out loud. But then something like the moment where he's like, I don't like hanging out with your dad. He's you know, he's creepy. You know, well, he creeps the hell out of me, to be honest. Just that little tiny, he creeps the hell out of me, to be honest, is so funny. And like, I literally laughed out loud at that part. And then it's followed up with the old man like saying like, oh, and I just want to apologize. For what? For being such a creepy old man. Like,
I can hear you think I'm dead.
yeah. Like that's a joke that like is set up, paid off within the same scene, and it also it's funny because you don't really expect it you don't expect it coming. Like every movie you ever see somebody whispering about somebody else off to the side, they're not meant to hear it, and the fact that they're in the same room so close, it's one of those moments where someone would be like, oh, he would be able to hear him from that far away, and it's like they realize that in the writing, and they're like, well, he did hear him, and now he's gonna literally put you in a headlock and like box you. One of the things early on, they have that little series of their revenge plots when they're kids at the beginning of the movie. I noticed that like the lines that those kids are saying, especially the character of Norm's character, what's his name? Mitch, yeah. Both like the 8-year-old and then also the teenager, the lines that they're saying sound so much like things that Norm would say. Like if you think a bit about it in Norm's voice, you're like, oh yeah, Norm would definitely say something like that. But it's unfortunate to me that like they didn't sit down with those kids and like just try as hard as they could to like get them to sound more like Norm's delivery.
Yeah.
Like when the kid's like, give me the milk money, and he's like, well, I would, but I'm not sure that you would spend it on milk or
You're
like
not
lunch.
Going to spend it on milk.
Yeah. But like imagine like it was a Norm delivery where he's like, oh, I would, but I'm not sure that you're gonna spend it on lunch, and then he gets thrown into the dumpster. Like it would be so good. And then like the one where he's at the funeral when his mom dies, and then his aunt like stuffs his face into her like massive breasts, and he's like, note to self, Aunt Peggy is your aunt. You're like, that sounds like a Norm line, but it doesn't sound like a Norm line coming out of that actor.
I mean, the movie was written by Norm, so a lot of it is in his voice. Just, you're right, it's not his cadence, because like this was relatively early in Norm's career too. So like, maybe there's a reason why he only got the one movie. Maybe people saw this and they were like, I don't even know.
I was reading a little bit more about it because I wasn't familiar about the movie and like what it was like, how it got made, how Bob Saget and Norm even know each other. I was like, how did this happen? And it was actually pushed. It was filmed 2 years before it was released. So much so that like Chris Farley had died.
6 months.
A year went by, and then another year went by, and then the movie was released. So it's like technically credited as like his last performance in a movie. And it had a lot to do with the same reason that he got fired from SNL, and the same reason that he was kind of blacklisted from certain projects for so long after he was fired from SNL, and it was because of all the OJ stuff. Like he was going so hard on OJ on SNL, and like he was one of the people in SNL that they would say, we can't say this joke, and they'd like pull him off to the side and be like, that joke didn't really work in rehearsal. And he's like, yeah, let's do it. We got to do it. Like, okay. And then he would just do it. He would just do the jokes during the show. And this one guy, I forget his name. He was like an NBC executive or something. And he's the one that like completely sort of blacklisted Norm and was like behind the scenes making it extremely difficult for this movie to get released. And I believe, I'm not 100% certain, that he was the one that ended up sort of snipping this movie's wings, so to speak, because this was supposed to be a full R-rated movie, and it's a PG-13 movie, and you can only imagine how much more vile this movie would be. I mean, you can say vile. I mean, you can say better if you want. I would say vile. It's already pretty vile for a PG-13 movie. But yeah, I mean, it would be a lot more raunchy. And I think that's what Bob Saget was trying to do, because he had just finished, like I think about a year before the filming of this movie, had just ended his America's Funniest Home Videos hosting spree that he'd been doing for like 12 years or
I
whatever.
think Full House even lasted until what year did this movie come out? 94?
1998.
1998? Okay, yeah, you're right. So yeah, 98. So I'm pretty sure that he only had a few years in between Full House, and is he known for directing anything else really?
Bob Saget? Not really. I couldn't find anything that was like super notable.
Which is crazy because if a lot of people know this, but a lot of people don't know this. But Bob Saget's stand-up is the complete opposite of his character of Danny Tanner, and even his like, I'm gonna make dumb bad jokes over YouTube videos, basically on America's Funniest Home Video. He used to tell jokes and still tells jokes about like fucking everybody on the cast and like Hitler jokes and rape jokes and just like all this
Yeah, you can
disgusting
tell
shit.
where all of the the underlying humor of this movie comes in.
Yeah.
He's trying to reestablish himself as like an edgy comedian by directing an edgy comedic movie, but it ended up getting slowed down by studio stuff that had them force it to be PG-13. And like, as much as there is still like a bunch of like edgy stuff in this, like a lot of this stuff for PG-13 would not get away with it now, and a lot of it would just not get put into a comedy now. Like, we've sort of evolved beyond the
Before we get too far beyond that, Kaylin, did you have this movie growing up? Like, did you watch it 1,000 times when you were a teenager?
I was actually a little late to this movie as well. I didn't see it when it first came out. It's one that I got on DVD probably, I would say maybe 10 years after. So like the late, like, or like 2000s or whatever. So it doesn't have as much of a nostalgic feel for me either. Watching it though, like, I definitely, get those old school vibes of like, the comedies from back then. And I definitely had some moments where like I had like a little kind of personal chuckle kind of thing. Not too many like huge guffaws, if you will, but definitely some good personal chuckles here and there throughout.
What is a personal chuckle? Like, you laugh and then look around to make sure no one saw you laughing at
Oh,
it?
like a sensible chuckle. Like,
Okay.
most of my laugh out loud moments came from like Artie Lange in this one, because he plays the straight man, which is fucking crazy. He's like never the straight man. And his scenes where he punches people and his hat falls down over his eyes just
Yeah,
made me laugh
I
out
have that
loud.
written down as well. Like, he punches several people, and every time he punches someone, he's wearing a weird hat, and it always like falls off. And he has to like fix it.
And his chaos, the scenes that he's doing the dirty work are so chaotic. And I thought that there was a lot of chaos with just these like montages of them doing pranks. And I thought that his moments in those were the most chaotic, because he's this big fat guy, blowing holes in walls and punching people out. There's that scene towards the end where he goes to the security guard and he's like, I got a shipment. I got to bring this box in. And the security guard's like, no, get out of here. And he
No,
punches him out.
the security guard says, "What's the company name?" He doesn't
Oh.
tell him to leave. He just asks him a very normal question.
He punches him out, and then Norm pops out of the box, and he's like, very clever. That made me laugh out loud. And movies like these old comedies, especially ones I've probably seen this movie 30 times. They don't make me laugh out loud very, very often. And this one, I did find, like Kaylin said, some very personal chuckles, some very sensible chuckles,
Right.
as I also like to put it.
Listen, I'm not one to rag on anybody else's humor. Like, what they think is funny is what they think is funny. It's fine. I just think that, like, for me to watch it now, as much as I like Norm, a lot of the jokes, if Norm was not delivering the punchlines, or if he was not the one that was kind of at the forefront, ahead of the ship, in the delivery of a lot of the jokes, I don't think that I would have been like, what am I watching? Like, I need to not watch this. This
At
is
least I
bad.
didn't get my nose bitten off by a Saigon 4.
Yeah,
You bastard! Yeah, I saw you there.
yeah. So that's again, like I wrote down they say whore way too many
They
times in
say
this
whore
movie.
way too many times.
They say it
Although it's funny,
probably like
Chris
100
Farley loves
times.
saying it.
Like, it's crazy the amount of times they say it.
when he's getting all the hookers ready to do the prank on David Koechner, who I forgot was in this movie as the used car salesman that fucking
Champ.
connected some wires. When he goes, okay, prostitutes, that I did laugh out loud at that because it's such a like weird thing to say, but that's totally
Again,
a Norm humor.
it's a funny thing for Norm to say, but it's not a
Yeah.
funny thing that, so, like, one of the things about Norm, I think, that will go on, because like Norm Macdonald is one of those comedians that I'll put on his talk show appearances more than I will his actual stand up or any of his like actual theatrical performances, because I don't think that he's a great actor. I think that he's a great deliverer of humor. Like he gives you
delivers
humor.
lines.
Yeah, and he does it in a very funny, weird way that is like so outside of what you expect from a comedian. Like, we watched Cable Guy last time, and like Jim Carrey is just like aggressively funny with like literally his whole body is funny. And then you look at Norm, who like almost doesn't move, and he's just kind of like, oh yeah, well, and like you can just his presentation of words is what's funny there. Like when he
Norm is
okay,
like,
so one of the examples is like when he's losing, like, I think it's very funny when his girlfriend's throwing out all of his clothes and people are just taking them and putting them on and like walking by him. Like, that's pretty funny. And he's like,
Hey,
oh, that's my Canadiens jersey. Yeah, and then he's like, hey, you're wearing my shirt. That's my shirt. And the guy takes it off and he's like covered in hair. And he goes, ah. And the
I was
guy
talking
hands
to
it to him and
somebody
he's like,
else
no, I was
that's
talking to
different than
somebody
you."
else who is different than you. It's just like, that's very funny. But in the hands of somebody else, like, how would Jim Carrey do that? He would like scream and grab at his face and fall down to his knees and then probably take the shirt and then like burn it or something. Like, it would have to be way more over the top for that to be funny, rather than him just saying, I was talking to somebody else who is different than you, which is like, it doesn't even make sense, but it's funny. Yeah, another one that got me was when he's like, "Hey, Mildred, Mildred,
yeah, I was
hey,
gonna bring that up
Mildred."
as well. Hi,
She's
Mildred.
like,
It's like,
my
that's
name's
not my
not
name.
Mildred. I think he might have forgot my name. And he's like, no, you never told me my name, so I just guessed. It's just like,
The novel approach.
yeah. And that's another one of those like weird things in a movie where somebody yells at another person's name. It happens in so many movies, but the fact that like he didn't actually forget her name, he just made up a name is funny. It's a funny thing. Not a laugh out loud funny thing, but a recognizably funny thing.
But also Mildred's such a like old name.
Yeah.
Up there with Gertrude.
Or Beatrice.
Before we get too far in, I do want to go back to Chevy Chase for 1 second and say that, again, he does have some of the best moments in this movie that are delivered. Because Chevy Chase is also one of those people that has a very particular style of delivery, and like it's not really easily replicated by other comedians.
He was still young in this movie too. He didn't have that like old man like bloat that he has now. Like,
yeah,
era.
He's not jowly, and he's like
he's
gray
still,
and like thin, but he's like still looks the same. Yeah,
he could deliver a joke still in 1998.
In that same line where he's like, "Are you a betting man?" And he's like, "Well, you know," and he lists like a bunch of like bets that he's made, and then he says Mr. T, and then he's like, "Are you telling me that you bet on Rocky 3 and you bet against Rocky?" And he's
I mean,
like,
that's fair.
You know,
Didn't Rocky
hindsight
win
is
the first two movies?
hindsight is 20/20, my friend.
I agree with Kayla. That is a safe bet, and I think that's kind of the joke they were making.
Yeah, I think it's funny though. It's again, it's clever. Like, there's a lot of jokes in this movie that I don't think are clever, and I think that primarily the ones that I don't think are clever are the actual dirty work that they do. the revenge schemes. I don't think that any of them are actually funny. I think
I
that
had forgotten how many times they use fish in their. They basically just use prostitutes, fish, and popcorn in all of their pranks.
yeah,
And I was gonna write down. I wanted to like categorize the dirty work pranks because I 100% thought that they were varied and imaginative. But literally,
they do the
it's the
same like
equivalent of
three
putting
ones over and
sugar
over
in a
again.
gas tank. It's
Yeah,
the equivalent of putting popcorn in a bulldozer to make it pop everywhere,
yeah,
which happens in the movie. It's
it
it's
does.
it's not
And
imaginative. They're just destroying property, really.
yeah, there's like one thing that I kind of wish, because like the beginning when like the pedophile guy who's like the crossing guard or whatever.
Yo,
Um,
how did they film that? Like, how do you, like, that's, like, I realize it's a movie, so there's, like, movie magic or something, but, like, how do you think they filmed that? Like, that's inappropriate. You know what I mean?
He just grabbed the
oh,
pants of his butt. What do you mean?
Like, do you think
I
they
have
had
several
something
answers
stuck?
for you. One, it was the 90s, and two, there are things called consent forms that parents sign. Three, it's just they just did it. Like they just did it, and it's an actor.
Do you think they had something stuffed in there, though? Or like, you know what I mean?
Like
Like, some
padding, like a fake butt.
yeah.
No, he just had his hand like he was just grabbing the like pants part.
Okay.
Yeah. Wait, are you talking about like him touching the butt? Or are you talking about like how his hand was stuck to the pants?
Well, no, like, that's what, like, was he, was there, my guess was that there was some sort of padded thing in there that he grabbed onto so that he wasn't
Oh
actually,
no, it was
like,
probably he was
creating
probably
a
just
barrier.
no, he was probably just grabbing the butt and like they probably sat down with the because he grabs one kid's butt and then he grabs the kid playing Norm's butt. It's not like he's grabbing like 20 kids' butts. They
Yeah, yeah,
probably
yeah.
sat those two kids down and were like, okay, this is what's going to happen in the scene and it's going to be funny and like, nothing weird is going on. Your parents are here. Like it's inappropriate, yes, but it's also like I think when you're in a studio situation, like there's like 100 people around, it's not as like creepy as just a random person grabbing your butt when you're crossing the street. Um, anyway, so that joke is, I don't think that would get put into anything now, but that revenge
No.
plot is like one of the only ones in the movie that I think is like creative beyond anything else they do, where he like puts super glue on his pants and then the guy grabs his and his hand is stuck and then he starts yelling almost like a newspaper kid from back in the day, like,
Extra, this kid's grabbing
there's an old man
adult is
grabbing an
grabbing my
8-year-old
ass.
butt over here. Everyone look around. And like I thought that was pretty funny. But then the joke that like comes up right after that is him and Artie Lange's character putting like 4 pistols into like
The
into like
bully's
a
desk.
bully's desk,
Yeah.
and like I think that that's like one I was like okay that's kind of funny, but like at the same time
That would
would
never
never
fly.
happen now. Yeah.
There's the joke where Norm, when they're in prison and Norm gets taken away by the dudes and then comes back and he's like, "I'm very disappointed in you. How, how dare you do that? How dare you?
Ridiculous.
Ridiculous." I thought that was a good way to like do a rape joke, but at the same time, I've never seen a rape joke again in a movie.
Yeah,
You know
and I
what
think
hurts
it's
the
probably
most? The
because
lack of respect.
The
Well,
lack of respect.
other than
so
that other thing
that
hurts
was
the
another
most.
one of the that was another one of the moments where I was like I see what they're doing, and it's again one of the examples of an inappropriate joke that is, impossible to exist in today's world being acceptable because of his delivery. Like that, the yikes moment of it is gone, and it's just like instead of him being so upset that he got raped, he's just disappointed, which is like
Yeah.
funny. Like that's a funny thing, but unfortunately I don't know. Rape is just kind of a hard thing to ever make funny, and I don't think that anyone should try because it's a terrible, terrible thing.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not trying to like shit on what people think are funny and whatnot. I'm just like trying to voice how I feel about it, and I think that's the point of this, is it not?
Oh, absolutely. And
Discuss our
talk about,
feelings, help introduce
yep,
movies to people who might not have seen them before. And well, like you said, this is your first time seeing it, so it's like
Yeah,
we introduced you to it almost. I'm not sure if this
yeah.
is going to mean anything to you guys, but Pops, but like when we first see him, he gave me Master Roshi vibes. Now I don't know if that means anything to you guys
I haven't seen Dragon Ball.
I know who Master Roshi is.
from Dragon Ball, right? So like,
Yeah.
because in the cartoon or like manga or whatever, like he'd be watching those workout videos and like
Yeah, I
indulging
do know
in like
that about
sex
him.
and shit.
Also funny, I've been watching the Jason movies lately, and that workout tape that he's watching is also in Friday the 13th Part 4.
No
Like it's the
way.
exact same tape. Yeah. And I haven't looked up
What
the
year did
tape.
that movie come out?
It came out in the 80s. I don't know the exact year, but
Okay.
I can figure it out. Hold on.
That's what workout tapes from the 80s looked like. They used to show that would be on like super early in the morning, and now you look at it and it looks like it looks like adult entertainment because of what their aerobic
1984.
Okay.
Um,
the
oh yeah,
movements that they're doing.
a
But the
lot of the
thing
aerobic.
is like in the 80s, women used to actually put those on and exercise to them.
Well, also here's the other thing is that to support the thing that you just said, a lot of the aerobics tapes that were made in the 80s, they were actually made by pornographers and sold mainstream to housewives and stuff to exercise to because they saw it was just easier to like, we'll make a lot of money on our porn, but then we can also put these porn stars in like leotards, get them to exercise, and sell them to housewives who are against porn. And bada
And
bing,
make
bada
more
boomba,
money.
we got the whole world in the palm of
But
our
then
hand.
on top of that, we got the resale from the weird pervs who really like to watch the women exercise. And then we
And
got
they
the
buy them
third
both.
boom, bada bing, bam, bada boom. That's our 80s porn impression.
Yeah. Um, 90s movie music. I
Movie title:
wrote that down.
26 minutes 15 seconds.
I had
Third Eye
26
Blind.
minutes, 17 seconds. I also paused it.
Oh, I had 26 minutes because I realize now what you guys mean by that, and I started writing it down. Well, this is the first time I've done it. 26 minutes and 16 seconds is what I wrote.
That's what I had. All right, 17. How did you guys watch it? Kaylin watched it on DVD.
I watched it on Prime.
I watched it on Prime. I had to get the month of MGM to watch it.
Boo!
Oh, weird. I didn't have to do that. Maybe,
Do you already subscribe to the MGM
maybe
add-on?
I might already. Yeah, you know what I think I did for like Neverending Story or something. I don't know.
It turns out though that MGM has a lot of dope shit on it. I noticed UHF is on there, and I'm probably gonna watch that this week.
We get all the Bond movies too.
But
Um,
I thought all the Bond movies were on like Crave.
oh wait, yeah, you know what? I think they bought HBO or not HBO, Warner Brothers. I think just purchased all of it. Yeah. So we're not going to get that lion roar at the beginning of our James John movies anymore.
James John.
It's me, James John, spy extraordinaire. Um, the crux of the movie is that they need to pay Chevy Chase so that the bookies don't kill him. I already said that. Um, oh yeah, I do have to bring up that, you know, as we were talking about Cable Guy last time, how that movie was impressive for the fact that it somehow got through an entire movie without having any sort of light sprinkling of transphobia or homophobia, but this movie is just lightly sprinkled with it all the way through. And then there's like the one big one, which is the movie theater, where it's like men in black who like to have sex with each other or whatever.
Yeah,
Which
that's
is like,
Sam looked at the screen.
yes. And
which is
that's your
inherently
classic gay
homophobic.
panic, where it's like, you know, I guess fine. It was
But here's
probably
the
funny
thing.
at the time.
Here's the thing about that. I'll play devil's advocate on this one. If you went to the theater and you were expecting to see literally just men in black, and then they played a gay porn, or any porn, forget the fact that it was gay porn. I think that's still a good prank because of how outrageous. I think the joke was that they were literally running out of the theater because it was gay porn. But in my devil's advocacy, I think that any old lady who is in the theater and pornography comes on, they might run out of the theater.
Have you
I
ever?
didn't.
Oh yeah, and I bet you that scene was written in with the intention of like Don Rickles' character gets trampled, and it's funny, like the explosion and him getting knocked, because him falling backwards and like everybody trampling on him.
Clearly a
That's
double.
what's funny about that scene. But I
There's
would
a lot of
also
Norm's doubles
argue
in this were hilarious.
I would argue that the the reason that they're leaving the theater is not funny to me, but him getting blasted blasted backwards, all the drinks and popcorn flying everywhere. Visually, it's funny. That is funny, but the stuff before it is just like you could have put anything there. It could have been anything, and like they could have put a snuff film.
That's
Snuff, hilarious, right?
Are we gonna say, Kalen?
Have you guys ever been to a movie where like audience members walked out of it?
Yeah, I've done it.
Yeah, I saw some like an old couple walk out of the Simpsons movie, I think.
Okay.
They're like, this is not as good as the Conan era.
No, it wasn't. It was live action. It was something that could have easily been misconstrued with a movie of the same name about something like The Opposite. I forget what it was, but I did witness two people leave, like two old people, be like, "Oh my gosh, what is this?" and leave the theater.
I witnessed it once, and it was for the Sacha Baron Cohen movie Bruno, and it was.
I think I know exactly the part you're talking about.
It was
So
around
they're
the
like
beginning.
69ing each other.
Oh, I thought it was like the part where the dick talks to the screen, where his dick is like flapping around.
Yeah, it was either when it was swirling around, or like when the guy was. It was definitely like early on in the movie, but like it like that was almost funnier than like the movie itself, and like I cracked up like that they got offended and left. Like it made me laugh so much.
I think the thing about
did they
Sacha
not
Baron
see a
Cohen
trailer
movies,
for this movie, or know who Sacha Baron Cohen is, or see Borat, or like, how do you end up in the Bruno movie?
Borat was a little more tame.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not to say that it was tame, but it was like it was like, you know,
it's offensive in a different way.
Yeah,
it's
against,
like,
you know, it was racist instead of homophobic or whatever.
Yeah. Well, the thing, like, Sacha Baron Cohen it's different than this type of movie because he's specifically attempting to offend people on purpose, and the humor comes out in it being sort of a reality-based thing where he's tricking people into being homophobic in real life based on the characters that he's portraying. He himself is not homophobic. He puts people into situations that are so extreme that it brings out homophobia in people who would otherwise be like, no, I'm not homophobic. And then it's like, oh God, maybe I am.
And that's the Borat character. He does that for, you know, rednecks to show their racism and their xenophobia and
xenophobe. That's the word.
Yeah, it's good that he does that, but it's there's that one gag. I don't. It's not really a gag because it's like very sad, but he has the person. It's on This Is America, and he has he's the Israeli dude. No, he's the anti-BLM redneck guy, and he's like, he tells this other redneck that he's put 3 kill switch bombs on 3 BLM Antifa protesters, and he's like, all you have to do is press these buttons, and they'll die. And the guy presses the 3 buttons without hesitation. And I saw Sacha Baron Cohen talking about that in an interview. There's this great series on I think it's GQ on YouTube or maybe Vanity Fair, one of those two. And it's called Actors on Actors. And it's just an actor talking to another actor. And this one was Don Cheadle talking to Sacha Baron Cohen. One of the best, like, 2 actors talking about their craft things I've ever seen. Besides, there's another one where it's
a different, like, the pairing is so interesting too because they're so sort of far apart in terms of what they do.
I think that's the gimmick. I think it's
Yeah.
just like two people from a genre that are far apart, and you wouldn't normally get to see talk to
I
each
mean,
other.
yeah. I think that's totally. I might have to look that up because that's very interesting to me.
The
There's
Shia
that round
LaBeouf
table of comedians as well that I think people should
I've
check
seen the
out.
round table ones for like directors and actors, and yeah, I've seen all those ones. But I didn't know they do like a one-on-one thing. That's kind of more interesting because like the round table ones are interesting, but it is clearly very edited, and at the same time, it's like sometimes you want to hear what Ridley Scott has to say, but he's too busy like chewing on walnuts or some shit, and he doesn't give a fuck about what they're talking about. And you're like, I want to hear what Ridley has to say about this.
The Shia LaBeouf one and Kristen Stewart and Shia LaBeouf episode of the Actors on Actors was really good too.
It's like cringy though, isn't it?
It's because like
I
she's
saw
like
bits from it.
awkward and like he's him, but like it they actually like pair together really well and bring out elements of each other.
I think I saw some out of context clips because I thought that one, out of context clip I saw for that made it seem like that one is a disaster. But on your recommendation, I'm gonna watch it probably right after this because I'm interested now.
I recommend it.
So we got about 15 minutes left here. These things fucking fly by, my
G7!
You press G8. If you like pina colada.
I noticed, okay, so in that part where he's like, looks like there's going to be a fight, you're going to put on something good, and then he like turns to it and he goes, yeah! But like the guy who's the bartender is like his eyes go so wide, like it almost like seems like maybe that guy didn't realize. Yeah, he didn't realize that Chris Farley was going to yell in his face.
Yeah, he wasn't ready
for it.
Which is
pretty funny. Also, Chris Farley is absolutely vile in this movie. I am disgusted by him every single moment, and obviously it's sad.
Disgusted in a good way?
Yeah, I mean, you're supposed to be disgusted by him. He when he turns and his nose is all just like you're like, oh my god, how do they do that?
And
but
then
like
when he's
really,
talking
it's
about
just like his
friend,
natural nose ends, and they added stuff, but it really looks like his nose is supposed to be longer than that.
He's talking about his friend who lives in the Y, and he keeps listing off disgusting things.
Oh god, yeah, they drained his knee the other day.
And his feet are bleeding. Yeah, I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
I don't want to stay with you.
Yeah, I was never really a huge Chris Farley fan, but I've met people that are, and they're so passionate about Chris Farley, and they've shown me like all the clips and like everything that he's been in that they love, and I've seen him in all like the old Adam Sandler movies, which I've seen all of them. I like some of them, but I feel like I'll feel the same way about this movie if I go back and revisit a lot of them. Like if I go back and watch Waterboy and Billy Madison and all that, like I'll probably not be as entranced by the humor as I once was.
You might have had to be there for Chris Farley, unfortunately.
Waterboy was like one of the last few good, like, you know, not to rag on Sandler or anything, but Waterboy was one of his last good ones. Wedding Singer was great.
So I never really liked Waterboy. Even as a kid, I was uncomfortable by it. Like I was made uncomfortable by Waterboy as a boy watching Waterboy. I was like, this is uncomfortable. Also, my last name is Waters, and for a good 5 years, people called me Waterboy. And I was
like, is Kaylee related to you?
Kaylee is my sister, yeah.
Hi, sis.
Little Mickey was kind of that where it changed. Little Mickey was
Little Nicky,
okay.
Though. I liked Little Nicky.
I love it too. But after that, that's when it really he did that, and then I think then he did Punch Drunk Love, and then
Punch Drunk Love was actually really good. PTA, Paul Thomas Anderson.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. So, what was the point I was trying to make? Oh, yeah, the Chris Farley era. You know, it ended here. This is his last movie, 1998. I was still a young kid. I didn't have that like ingrained like, oh my god, he's so funny from SNL. Like all the, you know, like down by the river and like all that kind of stuff. Like I see it and I'm like, I get it, it's funny. One of our friends, Andrew, he dressed up as Chris Farley once for Halloween as that character. What's his name? Like Matt Bauer?
Matt Foley.
Matt Foley. Okay. Yeah, and like he did
I
the
was there.
whole down by the river thing in the kitchen, and I had seen the clip, and him doing it in front of all of us was like the funniest thing I've ever seen. I was like keeling over with laughter, but I laughed harder at him doing it than I did at the actual skit in SNL. So like that kind of like unlocked this thing in my brain of being like, okay, so I get it. Like I understand why it's funny. Um, but it's also, it's shitty because you never know. He could have had an Adam Sandler-esque career where maybe he would do some dramatic comedies or even then just straight dramas, or like you look at someone like Robin Williams, like his career went crazy for a little while, or Jim Carrey, and he was exploding, right? Like he was supposed to be Shrek. He was like halfway
Chris
done
Farley?
recording. Yeah, he recorded half of Shrek and then he died,
I didn't
and
know
then
that.
they had to just they didn't have enough to complete the movie, so they had to go to Mike Myers, and Mike Myers finished it, and the entire movie became different
Did
tonally,
it
so they had to
change?
do
Like
all
I'm
these
assuming the vibe of it probably changed then, eh?
yeah, so like Farley was
I
doing a
won.
Farley voice, like he was doing sort of like his calm Farley voice with his crazy like ah
I
stuff
wonder
for
if
the ogre
Fat
theme.
Bastard in that case. I wonder if he still would have done a Scottish accent, and I wonder if Fat Bastard would have been Chris Farley in Austin Powers.
Oh, interesting.
I could see
Well, I
that.
mean, the thing is that Mike Myers had done his Scottish in So I Married an Axe
So I
Murderer.
married an act. Yeah, that's true because he plays his own dad in that or something, right?
Yeah, yeah. So he just loves doing that accent. So I think that it probably would have been the same. But I also think about, like this is kind of a weird thing to think about, but I put in parentheses like Rob Ford. Imagine Chris Farley was alive during the Rob Ford era. Remember
He
that?
would have. They would have brought him back.
Those would
They
have
would
been
have brought him
awesome
back to
skits.
SNL every
There would
week
have
to
been
do a
so
Rob
many
Ford.
SNL skits of
Yeah,
just Rob Ford, and it would have been Chris Farley every single time.
absolutely.
They had that other guy doing it, but like if Chris Farley was doing it, he probably would have killed it.
He would
It
have
would have been
fallen
so
through
funny.
so many tables as Rob Ford, and it would have been him falling
Remember?
through tables was one of the funniest things to me.
Yeah.
There's a very funny scene at the beginning of Black Sheep where he, he's partying in like a frat and he takes a giant beer bong rip or a regular bong rip and he just does like a Peter Griffin through a table, and I think that's where they
Oh
got the
yeah, yeah.
Peter Griffin through a table bit from.
Did you like
Like
Tommy
he's
Boy
almost
over Black Sheep or Black Sheep over Tommy Boy?
or maybe it is Tommy Boy. They're
I think it might have
to
been
me
Tommy
they're
Boy.
like
I think this time he was
identical.
in
They're so
college,
similar and came out so close together in
and
childhood
they're
that they
both
seem
human
like they're the
strange.
same movie.
Yeah,
They're both
Yeah,
what?
they're so close together and they're so similar in tone that in your brain as like for me, I don't know the difference between Tommy Boy and Black Sheep in my brain because I've seen them
Tommy Boy's
both.
better. Fat guy in a
Okay, I believe
little
you.
Yeah, I think
town.
Tommy Boy because Tommy Boy is a road trip movie.
Yeah. Well, they both.
Okay,
Well, I think they're both kind
that's
of
where they
road
have like
trips.
the garbage bags on the windows and they're driving. I
Because of the
remember that
deer,
stuff.
they hit a deer and then they try to bring the deer and then the deer freaks out. I honestly,
Oh,
I used to own both of those movies on VHS as well, and I cannot, for the life of me, tell you the. I know the plot of Tommy Boy is that he has to take over for his dad, and the plot of Black Sheep is like
he
politics,
has to
right?
not mess up
Like
his dad's camp. No, his brother's campaign.
right,
Yeah.
right,
One thing I got to
and
say
in
about
both,
Dirty Work, though, the no.
no,
Have you ever robbed a bank? No. Have you
No.
ever climbed Mount Everest? No. Have you ever said you can see how women find Burt Reynolds attractive? No.
no.
It's Sean Connery actually.
Ah, damn it, you're right.
And then later, when they're destroying the house, he sees a like from Russia with love poster of Sean Connery, and he's like, and he takes it and like runs out of the room with it. It's a good callback because he's gonna masturbate to it later or something. He loves Sean Connery. That's another thing about Norm Macdonald is like he does and has always made a lot of gay jokes constantly, but it seems to by the end of his career, and I don't mean end of his career because his career would have went on forever if he
Yeah, he would have
hadn't
just kept doing the Norm
died.
show.
Yeah. But by
The
the
Norm
end, he
show.
kind of like he figured it out and he started like making new jokes about gay stuff that like I I think are just so funny. Like he did this bit a couple times. He did it on Larry King, and he also did it on Conan, where they asked because he's releasing a book, and they would be like, "So, anything in this book that nobody knows about you? Any like juicy tidbits about your life?" And he would say, "Well, I think the biggest thing I reveal about myself is that I'm a deeply closeted gay man."
Yeah,
And they're like, everyone was like, "What?" He's like,
I saw the
"Yeah,
Larry King one.
yeah." And he's like, "You're gay?" He's like, "No." Well, I mean, what do you mean? I said I'm deeply closeted.
Yeah.
And then it keeps going back and forth. And he's like, "Do you know what deeply closeted means? It means a man who is so deep in the closet that he refuses to admit that he's gay." It's like, okay, yeah. So I'm telling you, I'm not gay. it's, and it's just like, it's such a simple, funny concept of like he was probably thinking about it one day, being like, "That's funny," and then like just figured out a way to goat other people into like getting him to like keep doing this joke. And it worked way better on Conan because he tried to do it on Larry King as well, and Larry King was
And
just
Larry
like,
King doesn't really
"Oh,
understand comedy. He
no,"
doesn't
he's like,
understand like that he's
"So
being
you're gay
joked around
then?"
with.
Like, "No, I'm telling you, I'm not gay." Like, "I don't know. I think let's go to commercial."
He's a
Yeah,
comics
do you not
comic.
know what being a closeted homosexual means? That isn't working. I'm going home. So I watched Hitler's Dog, his I think final stand-up special. I don't know if he did one after. It's from 2018. I watched it recently. It's on Netflix. Very funny, and it's a very, very, very good example of how he just goes up there and it's so effortless that it sounds like like stand-up comedians write everything down, and the art of stand-up comedy is to make it look like it's off the cuff. But
Yep.
he had such a way with it that this special, I was sitting there going like, is he just up there saying these things right now? Like he was so good at it that I was tricked, and I know how stand-up comedy works through and through. I would recommend that special to anybody, especially given that he's now passed away. It's
Yeah, I think that he had a few stand-up routines that I've only seen bits and pieces of on TikTok that seem like they're very recent.
yeah.
There's one that because he's talking about the pandemic and stuff, and you're just like, "Oh, okay, so this is within the last year and a half, almost 2 years now,
But
I
like
guess."
an
But
actual recorded special, I think that 2018
yeah.
might be the final one. So we have about 5 minutes left here. Let's go around, give our final thoughts, and give us
Oh,
a
but I
rating.
want to I want to talk about the car break-in when he pops up with the sleeping cap on. That's hilarious. He's like,
Yo,
That
he
is
"Yeah,
has an
funny.
some of us
elastic
are trying to
band on
sleep
it.
back here." He has like he's wearing like a Rip Van Winkle like pajamas. Like that's so funny. All right.
Trying to
Anyway.
sleep here, and then when he wakes up later, it's like note. He has the note to self thing, and he plays it back.
Oh, I have
Note to
one other
self: no
thing
matter
that
how bad things get, there's always beer.
there's
Which
always beer. Yeah. There's also one other thing I wanted to say. So you know the part where they put the popcorn inside of the bulldozer, and there's two cops that are following the trail, and the one cop's like, "What do you think this is?" And the other cop's like, "Well, it's either nothing, or it's the dumbest criminals on the planet Earth." They're walking. That cop. So one of them's white, one of them's black. The black cop. I was watching it. And I was like, "This guy. I know this guy," and I feel weirdly like him being on screen right now is making my heart feel really good, and I don't know what. And so I looked him up. His name is Johnny Chase, and
Sounds
he
like a porn star.
no, he was the host of Polka Dot Door when we were
Oh,
kids. I was
well,
like
what about
scrolling
the
through.
woman?
What about the? Oh, well, yeah, she was probably in dirty work as well somewhere. I didn't look her up.
No, I mean there. I remember a woman being the host of Polka
There was
Dot
a woman and there was a man. There was a white woman and a black man that hosted Polka Dot Door. And every time Pokeroo would show up, the man would leave. And like when he was gone, Pokeroo would show up, so everybody was like, "Oh, he's Pokeroo," which he probably was because it was like a low ass budget show where they just like put on the Pokeroo costume and show up. But he was also in like Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark and like all these shows that were filmed in Ontario when we
Nice.
were kids. And like I just his voice and like his face, I was like, this guy. And they don't even show his full face, but I was like, I know this man. I know this man, and he's making my heart feel good. And then I realized that he was one of the hosts of my childhood. So Johnny Chase, if you're out there, just know that I love you.
Awesome. All right, so I'm just gonna finish off the show here and say my final thought. Now I don't think it held up that well, but since I'm so connected to it, I really enjoyed watching it again. I probably will make it a more frequent, like every couple of years, to watch it again as well, because now that Norm's passed away, um, I feel that nostalgia hit even harder when I watch a movie like this. Like if he was still alive when we did Dirty Work, I wouldn't gush over it at
We
all.
wouldn't
I'd
have
be like,
done dirty work if
we
he was
wouldn't have
alive.
done Dirty Work, yeah.
We would have
I
done
wanted this
Death
to be,
Becomes Her.
yeah, that's true. I wanted this to be more of a celebration of Norm, which I think we did a pretty good job of. Um, I unfortunately would only give this movie probably a 2.5 or a 2.7, but because Norm has recently passed and I've seen this movie no less than 30 times, it's a certified 5 out of 5. Certified out of 5. But really, it's realistically probably like a 2.6 or a 2.7.
Right.
Kalen, hit me with your final thoughts, your rating.
One of my final thoughts is I'm upset that so this came out shortly after he was fired from SNL, and NBC like basically blackballed him and didn't like advertise the movie at all on their station network or whatever, which just seems kind of like petty, sort of, but whatever. As far as yeah, so it is. I guess you could say it's dated. Like you can feel the '90s of it. Like I said earlier, I did have like some nice personal chuckles throughout, and I don't think anyone's ever done like his like deadpan, like kind of cadence style delivery, like it's unmatched, and he does
Yeah.
it perfectly. No one else can ever top it. I don't think. The as far as to give it an honest rating, and we talked about this last time. I'm not sure if I use zero. I'm not sure if I use zero in my rating, but because I was thinking about this the other day, I was like, okay, I need to start being more like strict about my ratings. But so I'm thinking either I start with zero, or I start with 0.5, or I start with 1. I might start with 1, but then I feel like there could be things that are below 1. Anyway, I digress. So I had some good laughs. It is something that I would throw on like after a period of time, like I could put it on again and have some laughs again. So I was kind of thinking either 2.5 or 3-ish was where I was kind of at. So I'm gonna give it a solid 3.
Okay, right on. Steve, let's take it home, buddy.
All right, here we go. So this movie, I guess I've already kind of gone through it a bunch. It doesn't land for me in many areas. We just finished doing the Cable Guy last time.
How old
What?
are you, by the way, Steve?
I'm 34.
Okay, just checking.
Uh, just checking.
Oh,
Just want to
also,
make
were
sure.
you bowling earlier, or are you about to go bowling? Is that a
Oh,
bowling
sorry.
glove?
No, I was drawing. I have like a drawing glove for
Ah,
when
okay, so
I'm,
you don't smudge
yeah,
and whatnot. Okay, my bad. Sorry for
yeah.
interrupting. My bad.
It's okay.
Are you going bowling later?
Also, these are like the fingers you don't use. So yeah, it doesn't hit for me. I only just saw it my adulthood. There are a lot of points in the movie that I find to be a little bit too vulgar in terms of like how my brain sits nowadays. Like, you know, I can chuckle at some stuff, but there's other things that I'm like, ugh, God, eye roll. And, you know, we just finished doing The Cable Guy, which was like a pleasant surprise for me because it didn't have a lot of that sexism and homophobia and transphobia at all. And I was like, wow, this is a crazy 90s movie that somehow like gets away with not having the easy low-hanging fruit. And this movie is almost continuously low-hanging fruit. But then there's also stuff that like genuinely makes me laugh. You know, like when they put all the fish in the mansion and then like the weird mafia, like a secondary movie comes in for a second and they're like, yeah, it looks like good stuff. And they're like, smells like fish in here. And then it's like, what is that? Some sort of code?
Or something?
Yeah. And then they just like, they're standing there holding the fish and there's like a crazy mob war happening outside the room, but you don't see any of it. You just hear it. Like, that's funny and I like it. The Gary Coleman
I was
stuff
bringing in a chainsaw. Guys, put the chainsaw down. He's got a grenade.
He took the chainsaw from me, and now he's using the chainsaw on us. I like that there was like a shared hallucination where, you know, he hallucinated Gary Coleman, and then the other security guards also hallucinated Gary Coleman later in the safe, like for whatever reason. Also a thing that will never travel on for like in 10 years, people are not going to know who the fuck Gary Coleman is. Like, I barely know who Gary Coleman is now. Norm's
guy.
clothes are too big for him. Way too big.
Yeah, classic 90s.
Yeah. It's unfortunate that Bob Saget wanted to make a raunchy comedy that was a rated R movie, and he didn't get to do that. So I do think that probably stifles what his original vision was for the movie. But at the same time, the unoriginal and non-creative revenge plots that he's come up with in this movie, they're like, we've all heard of the dead hooker in a trunk, and that's been around since the beginning of fucking time. Since hookers and like transportation via horse existed, I'm sure that joke existed somewhere, right?
I would say that Trunks
what was his
predate.
name again? Oh yeah, Jesus.
Yeah.
Trunks predate vehicles, I would say, if you think about it.
That's true. Too. Yeah, you're right, Jason. That's something I didn't even think of. Yeah. So to me, that's, you know, it's just sort of indicative of like the movie has some really creative moments, and I listed them throughout this review, but there's also like the set pieces, the big moments that just don't really do anything for me. Like when they're bashing through that house, the only thing that I thought was funny was when he finds the James Bond poster. And I was like, oh yeah, that's funny to me. That was the only thing that's funny. So yeah, anyway, again, I think that a lot of the jokes in this movie would literally fizzle into nothing if it was not coming out of Norm Macdonald's mouth. He's one of my favorite comedians, but also just like conversationalists. His podcasts and his appearances on late night talk shows are some of the most interesting things you'll ever watch. And that is the only reason why this movie kind of had me get all the way through it, is because it was Norm saying the stuff that was being said. But that being said, I'll probably never watch this movie again, and I'm going to give it a 1. I'm sorry.
Wow. Well,
you stuff your
there it
stories in
is.
a sack.
I mean, at least I didn't get my nose bitten off by a Saigon whore.
I mean, like, listen, I again, I don't want to trample on other people's ha-has, their chuckles, their personal chuckles or their sensible chuckles. I just didn't have as many as you did, and I don't think that there's any reason for me to ever watch this movie again, because I don't
It's
think I'll
time to
find
pay
it.
the fiddler, whore!
Right.
Yeah. That whole scene where he's talking to the skunks is so fucking good. But you know
All
what?
right.
You're right.
Well, maybe, you know what? Maybe the only reason I would watch this movie again is to have a little tick sheet for how many times they say the word whore or prostitute.
Drink every time they say whore and dirty work, and we'll both be dead.
You know what
drunk
could
in the
do
first
it though
25
for
minutes.
you? Sometimes I find who you watch a movie with, like let's say we were together, like physically, like in like watching it together. Sometimes like witnessing other people enjoy something helps me enjoy stuff. or whatever.
Well,
And
maybe
talking
we
about
should.
it afterwards too, my ratings of movies have gone up a full letter grade just by talking to Kaylin in
Well, that
previous
happened during
episodes.
Stand By Me as well, right?
Yeah, and then I went to Montreal the following weekend, and I was there with a guy who makes movies, and his favorite movie is Stand By Me, and because of that, we were able to connect because
Nice.
I basically recited my reviews from our show to him, and he was very impressed by that. And but we got to it was really cool to be able to talk to somebody in depth about a movie like that.
Well,
So that
To Kaylin's point, maybe we should consider at some point doing a live reaction to Dirty Work to see if we change
yeah,
our tune.
I'd be down. So
It'll
with
just be me in
that
the corner with my hands folded the
I
whole
hate
time.
this.
I'm not
This
I
movie
don't
is
want to watch
offensive.
this.
Yeah.
So with that, that brings us to the end of another week. This is an interesting not benchmark, an interesting turning point for the show because starting next week we will be going live weekly.
Ooh, what's it called
Tentatively,
again?
we will be. Oh, the what? Steve came up with the
Gruesome
name
something or
for
Griersome or what would you guys come up
the
with again?
grimoire of
Oh, the Grimoire of Familiar Killers. The Autumn
yes.
Grimoire of Familiar Killers.
That is the
Perfect.
name of our October series. We are going to be doing weekly shows, and we are going to be doing our favorite slasher flick. So we'll be asking you the question that's on everybody's mind. Hey,
Who's your familiar killer? Sorry, say it again. I ruined it.
hey, did you see this one?
Hey, did you see this one?
I did.
I think that's the new bit for Steve, for Steve and Kayla. I'm Jason.
For Jason, Steven, and that great Canadian bastard, Norm McDonald, I'm Kellen.
For Kaylin and Jason and Norm, I'm Steven.
And for Norm, rest in peace, Norm. Thank you for the great times. We'll see you next week. Bye bye.